Welcome everyone to another episode of Takeover United Pod, a place where we take over your weekend with all things Manchester United and depress you just like we depress ourselves watching this wretched club week in and week out. Before we start, quick reminder: we go live every weekend. If you're seeing us now live, we are on Twitch. Our episodes go up on YouTube later and also all your favorite podcast platforms Apple, Spotify, YouTube as well. And don't forget to catch all our short form content on YouTube, Instagram, and Twitter. With that out of the way, this week, United only had one game in the last week since we podcast last, and it was a game against Tottenham. Uh, it was widely billed as well. Yeah, I think people expected it's going to be kind of a disappointing, low scoring game because both teams can't create or finish. But the match lived up to that, right? It was a very boring 1-0 loss, but it was a loss for United to a team that before the game was below us in the table, who have been having similar struggles. But as is often the case with United, we give opportunities not to out of young, not just to out of form youngsters, but to out of form teams. And we probably have revived Tottenham season at this point. But yeah, that's what it was. A disappointing 1-0 loss. I think Madison scored the goal, right? Pretty early on. It was a pretty early goal. But yeah, I'll start with you, Rohan. I know you saw the game, the brave soul who saw us play. Uh, Before we start ranting, where did you see any positives at all from the game?
I like firstly I'd like to go back to the previous podcast where I predicted it would be a boring 1-1 draw, and I'm disappointed because United couldn't even score that one goal to prove me right. Rest was right. Rest of the prediction was right. uh, Talking about positives, I think we have a decent, like a new left wing back. I think he can in Dorgu. I think he can play that role really well for our team. He's new. He needs some time to adapt,
Yeah,
but I think he had a very good game. Like a very like at least like better than what already experienced players have had. Like the performance wasn't that great. And I would like to add like the Spurs were also not great, but both teams had decent enough chances to score and win the game, but they
yeah,
just didn't take it. And Madison took his, like he pounced on the goal and he took it off. It ricocheted and he took it off.
mhm,
But apart from that, there was nothing much from both the teams. I think Zirkzee was one bright spot who had a decent game as well. But again, we have been lacking that kind of like even if we create chances, like I heard about a stat where we have created big chances almost like close to like someone like a Nottingham Forest, and we haven't taken even like 50% of them. Like it's a horrible, like our, our strikers are not good enough, and clearly it shows, right? Like if you don't take your chances, you clearly don't deserve to win the game. So yeah, it was a boring 1-0 loss, and yeah, well deserved. So hopefully, like next games we can like maybe introduce
yeah.
what is the striker's name? The young kid.
Cheeto,
I I forgot the name. Uh,
Cheeto.
Cheedo. Yeah, Cheedo. Hopefully we can give Cheeto some more minutes. Let's
Yeah,
try him out, and maybe hope that he comes in and you know finishes off those chances and at least gives us a chance to win the game.
yeah. Yeah, I was just trying to share this XG thing. I'm not sure if you guys can see it. Which can you see it? Could you guys see when I shared my screen?
No.
No, it hasn't come up.
Like, okay, I'm sharing it now. Do you see it now?
Yeah,
Okay.
I can see it now. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So
Yeah,
yeah, it's not like okay. Let me put it on the stream as well now. Yeah, it's not like we didn't create, right? 1.67. It's not bad. But I guess if you look at the XG 2.31, 1.67, it's similar for both teams, right? So they both are just horrible at finishing, even though they try to create chances.
Um. So yeah, I think XG is a metric that it's often like misused a little bit. I've been guilty of this myself too.
Yeah.
Uh, it can give a decent idea of it can give a decent idea of how your team played on a particular day, and the kind of
Mm-hmm.
chances that you were able to create. It definitely gives you that bigger picture maybe.
Yeah.
But the thing with XG is also that non-neutral game state XG, basically when one team's leading in a game, is
Mm.
not indicative of performance typically, because what happens is, like, for instance, in games like where Tottenham went ahead in this game, right?
Yeah.
uh, Typically teams would tend to drop off a little bit and invite the opposition onto them so that they could launch more counterattacks or hit
Right.
more space.
Mm.
So I feel like it can be a good indicator, but it's not the be all and end all. uh, the only takeaway I'd have from this game is we conceded pretty early on uh, to Tottenham in the 13th minute. Tottenham weren't particularly good. They weren't very effective themselves in creating those chances, but we still somehow contrived to give up 2.3 xg, uh, which is a little concerning considering we played five defenders. I feel like that could have gone better for us. uh, if you want positives, the only thing I could say from what I watched in the game is that I thought Zogzi was very effective in that 10 role. He actually fashioned at least two or three of our really good chances
Yeah.
by playing some very decent passes that split Tottenham's defense. And he kept picking up pockets of space and making these little nutmegs and little shifts of his body that
Right.
created trouble for Tottenham, drew defenders out, and created openings for Garnacho and Hoyland, which, as we know, wasn't really taken advantage of.
9.5.
But yeah,
9.5. Yeah. So this is an incredible stat, right? 70% of of Tottenham's XG was in this two games against us. Like
yep, yep.
this, man. It's I don't have words for this. Oh, sorry. Let me put it on the stream as well. Yeah, there you go, viewers. 17% of Tottenham's XG in the Premier League this season has come against Man United. That's an incredible stat. They've played 25 games this season, and one six of their XGs in just two games. And they have a very good goal.
Yeah,
They have a very good goal defense. They're like the third highest goal scored in the league as well.
yeah. I think it worries me a little because from what I saw in the game, Tottenham weren't exactly very effective themselves, and
Hmm.
I thought they were open at the back as they often tend to be, and we did create openings because of that. That's how, like, you had the Zirkzee pass to Garnacho,
Right.
which I think he hit near post at the keeper and it was saved, and then he tried to lay it off for Hoyland. That didn't work out.
Hmm.
So we definitely created those openings and took advantage of how shaky they looked at the back, which is understandable given their injury crisis.
Yeah.
Uh, I didn't really feel at any point like United had a foothold on the midfield. Like we didn't really control proceedings in the middle of the pitch, and I feel uh, it created this state of chaos at times, which put a lot of additional pressure on our defense. And the defense had its own issues. Like one theme I noticed repeating a lot, and this isn't really like tactical. I think it's just how the players are executing stuff. Uh, Mazraoui, Maguire, and Delict was our backline, and they had a little bit of trouble in maintaining the offside line. We weren't super deep for some parts of the game, and they sometimes had this like disconnect in how they were keeping the backline. I don't know if that's just because they haven't played too many games together as a backline, but there was definitely some disconnect there, and it
Yeah,
led
yeah,
to Tottenham finding space behind the defensive line.
yeah. And we did play a pretty high line. If you can you guess see?
Yeah,
Yeah,
like
Yeah, we
decently
did play
so. Yeah.
pretty. But even Tottenham played a pretty high line, right? We see generally teams playing deep against us. But Tottenham also played a pretty high line with us. Maybe that's why our XG was better than other games. Gave us space to run and for a place to make runs. But again, the lack of finishing. Uh, I mean, it's been a common trope on this channel now about how garbage Zugs is, or not sharing a stream. Alright, viewers, this is what I was sharing to the pod. This is the average player positions, and United is played a pretty high line. But yeah, I think, yeah, man, I think we have trolled Hoyland enough on this channel. Um, but just goes to show, right? Like it's not working out, right? You either send him on loan or get another striker, make him the backup. Not don't play him as the main man. He's not that good yet, and I guess we just have to wait till the summer now to resolve the striker situation. Or like we were discussing last time, play Cheeto, like Rowan was just alluding to earlier.
I don't think that's the worst shout from Rohan, because I, I don't think that's the worst shout from Rohan. I know that Cheeto may not guarantee goals, but at the moment, like none of our strikers could hit a barn door with a machine gun. So I'm comfortable with taking that gamble on a youngster. And maybe that rotation also gives them an opportunity to build back some form, because they're
Right?
not
Yeah, yeah,
scoring, but they're starting every game. That's not really going to change something magically.
yeah. And what do you make of this heat map? Like our most active area is Onana. Like look at Tottenham seat five. The left wing going on the left wing, some of it on the right wing. There's some action. United is
Yeah,
you have one red splotch at the goalkeeper, which fine, that's expected. The goalkeeper gets a lot of balls to him, but rest is just uniform green, man. They're like barely like there are some yellow spots, but it's barely visible. Like look at Tottenham. You have like fullbacks. You have big splotches. You have a big splotch at left wing. Look at United. It's nothing.
so that left wing splotch on Tottenham's graphic is interesting to me, because if you look at a lot of the chances or opportunities that they fashioned, a lot of them came from overlaps and underlaps on the left hand side, where Dalo and Mazraoui were defending for us. Our right hand side, Tottenham's left,
Yeah.
and I saw quite a few instances of Jed Spence running beyond Mazraoui or Dalo, often just due to his pace, but also due to, I think, positional issues that both of them were like both are kind of in an unfamiliar position, and one at wing back, one at right center back, and it was showing, and they didn't really have a good balance of which runner to track where. Dallo
Mm.
also has this tendency or instruction to sometimes invert into midfield, and that would lead often to Mazraoui pushing very wide to the touchline, to track the wide player there. And I feel like it created this situation where there would be an extra man running on that side, and both would suddenly be caught out of position. So I'm really not surprised that that shows up in the heat map. They had a lot of joy down that side.
Mhm. Yeah, true. Just goes to show how consistently as we are. But I mean, if you look at player positions, I think seems like Dalo was kind of hugging the touchline this game.
Yeah, he looked more comfortable on the right. Like earlier, he was playing on the left, and
Yeah,
but the whole thing with Dallo is going like on the ball, he's decent. Like on the right side, he was looking comfortable.
yeah,
But as you progress in attack and as you go to the third phase in attack, Dallo doesn't necessarily, for me, he doesn't have the quality to get the crosses in, to really, get uh, get a good passing move, or even like, just uh, passing, making the right moves or making the right runs. He just continuously keeps making bad decisions in attack, and the same in defense as well. So really, would question, like, if Dallo wasn't like, if there was a chance, would you drop Dallo for maybe to play Ahmad there, and maybe move Zirkzee in his position, then maybe Bruno
yeah,
back to 10? So like these kind of scenarios do pop up in my head, and like I feel that maybe Dallo going forward isn't our like best option at wing back as well, because
yeah,
neither does he offer much in attack, neither in defense. Uh, so like, is he like a sell? This is he like an obvious sell this summer, or do we keep him as a backup? So these kind of questions do get raised now and then.
yeah. I think personally, I would still keep him as a backup rather than sell him. I mean, our squad is so thin right now that I mean, yeah, I mean, obviously, Ahmad at right wing back has been a revelation. So obviously, he would be my first choice. I think even last week when, in the last week's pod when we did lineups, because when we're picking the best possible lineup, I think Ahmad was one of the few positions which was like unanimous, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, um, I would still keep Dallo as a backup. I mean, he can play multiple positions. He has played centre back also in the past. Not that he's a good centre back or a good right back or a good anything for that matter, but I would still keep him simply for the fact that our squad is so paper thin right now. Like, look at the injury crisis going on right now. We have nobody to play. Um, like, we have so many people injured, right? And last week when we were discussing, we're saying maybe we should start Kone in midfield. And what do we hear this week? That Amorim is actually considering giving Kone some minutes. Maybe not a start. Well, I don't think he's that adventurous. But we are seeing reports that Kone might, you know, train with the first team and get some minutes. Get some minutes. So yeah, just yeah, I think I would still keep Dalot as a backup. What about you, Sandeep?
Uh, yeah, I mean, I'm okay with keeping him as a backup unless we get a good deal for him. Uh, I think there are roles that Diego Dallo can perform. I think he's pretty decent at playing at right back and inverting into midfield. That's pretty much his primary strength. Uh, there isn't
Hmm.
really much scope for being that player in Amarim's system. So definitely, I would hope that a good deal comes in for him and try to move him on. I think both him and Mazraoui now don't have an easy fit in the squad. Like, sure, Mazraoui is playing right center back, but it's not perfect. There are
Yeah.
problems, especially off the ball. uh he's got this tendency of sometimes missing his man behind him when there are aerial balls from the other side.
Yeah.
I feel like that's in the United DNA lately with players on that side. uh So that's one thing. And also I also see like ground coverage issues with him. Like when you have wide center backs, you want like they have to cover insane amounts of ground, because they're kind of dealing with the dual responsibility of a fullback and chasing
Yeah,
players on the wing, but they
Hmm.
also have to be able to cover the more central players, right? So that's actually one of the most intense roles in a way. And I don't see Mazraoui having that. So yeah, if the system is going to be this going forward, we might need replacements for both of them. And they would also benefit from heading to a system that fits them better.
yeah,
I want to point out one little thing before we shift from the Tottenham game,
mm,
because I've been, I think, I've seen or felt issues with a lot of what's Amarim done. So I felt that there were some things he did well in this game. Uh, One of them is, I think he's profiling Zirkzee correctly. He understands that this is not the guy who's probably going to lead your line, but he can be someone who's either a false nine or act like a 10. And that's benefiting Zirkzee. He's ending up in pockets that work well for him. I think he was probably our best player on the day. Uh, so yeah, I think that's something Amarim's done well. I think he's doing a good job by platforming Dorgu as our primary left wing back, and we're seeing Dorgu getting in some good crosses from the left hand side. We're still unable to finish them, but there's potential for things to improve there. And
yeah,
I think the last thing, uh, I I don't agree with his interpretation here, but I can see his idea taking shape. If you notice, like our lines are pretty condensed in the average positions. Like the front line is uh, pretty close to the defensive line.
yeah, yeah,
The vertical width of our team isn't much. So uh, there are issues with a setup like this, but it does seem like something Amram wants. He wants the defensive line to be somewhat higher than a mid block, but he also wants space between the lines to not be very congested. Now that makes sense from his point of view, because in a 5-2-3, when you press in a pentagon shape, right? Uh, your key defensive strength is compressing space in the middle, because you only have two players in the middle, so you don't want players to be easily getting between the lines. That's something we highlighted in the last podcast. So he's actually like tried to solve that. What happens though, or the negative issue with doing this is the minute you're compressed as a team, you're high up the pitch, your backline's higher up the pitch, but you're also compressed as a unit. Um, Suddenly, there's a lot of space behind you and in front of you. So teams have time and space. They have time to just sit on the ball, pick out a long pass, and play over your defense. And you'll notice that Tottenham had a lot of joy in running in behind us. So it's weird labeling this as a positive, but to me, it's just a sign that some of Amarim's ideas, however they might be, are starting to get across to the players. Like we're starting to see some of his ideas take shape on the pitch. Another thing I noticed is minimum width. Um, Minimum width is this concept. It basically means that instead of having your widest players, like the wing backs, occupy the widest areas of the pitch, you try to drag the opposition narrow, so that your widest players can also sort of sit like on the edges of the box rather than on the edges of the touchline. The benefit here is, if your team loses the
right,
ball, you're already in a compact shape. Like
yeah, yeah,
if your team were to lose the ball, you're in relatively a compact shape, so the team has to kind of attack around you instead of through you. It's harder for them. So I felt that, like if you look at many instances, Dorgu and Dalo, who should be very wide, the wing backs, were actually occupying the edge of the penalty box. Like they were in line with that even before the ball had reached there for us. So I found that quite interesting. And again, it might be a sign some of Amarim's tactical steps are taking effect, because that's something he really liked to do with Sporting as well. But it was easier there because I think he had better players and easier oppositions to deal with. But what do you think, Rowan? Like, do you see hope for the future? You know.
I don't see hope for the future if this team is still there after the summer. After the summer, because uh, you know these players. I mean, I for example Dalo, right? Like, okay, like if you continue to play him, maybe he learns next year, maybe he improves a little bit, but I don't see him fitting that role at any, like I can't see him fitting that right wing back role very well. Like the stuff that we need from the right wing back in attack as well as in defense, I don't think Dallo would be able to do that. And that's the problem with most of our team, right? Like the profiling is not there. Uh, Clearly, even when there are chances, there are we are facing an easy opposition and there is not too much pressure on the ball and we can hold our shape. Even then the decision making has been bad. And once when that happens on the pitch, then you can clearly see that it does not, like, it does not fit. So it's best that, like, for now at least, he needs to keep playing that shape, and he needs to figure out a way of, understand figure of he needs to understand, like, which players that are, a couple, like, in my opinion there are a few, like maybe Bruno, Ahmad, even Kobe Mainu, maybe they have a place in this team for the future, but he needs to identify how his formation is going to look next season. He needs to identify which players we need to target and then act accordingly. Because this season is basically like it's gone. Like it's just like a season for assessment, and it's just a season for survival. So I think we are at that stage right now. So it's just an assessment kind of a thing for Amarim.
Yeah, I don't think the formation is changing, man, next season. Amarim
Yeah.
is pretty. He's married to that formation. So I don't think he's going to change that at least.
Uh, yeah, I think that's a dead horse. Like he isn't gonna change on that front. I'm curious about something else that happened midweek because I feel like we've dissected dissected the match like as many ways as we can, and I don't feel like there's going to be some fundamental dramatic change in system from week to week. So let's move ahead and let's talk about Varane's interview in midweek. What do you guys make of that, Pratyush?
Oh yes. Yeah, that was a pretty interesting interview from Varane. So yeah, let's quickly tell our viewers what went down in the interview.
Yeah.
So Raphael Varane this week gave an interview. I forget with who, but it's been a while since I've heard directly from Rafa. He gave an interview to the Athletic, and
Yeah.
he spoke about his time at Real Madrid and at Manchester United. But I think for us at least, the United parts are the more interesting ones. But he was kind of contrasting the way he played at Real and at United. He was saying that he naturally is a very instinctive player, and Madrid was, a very instinctive team, right? And compared to the fact he was, talking about how under, and he said it was similar under, whether it was Zidane or Carlo Ancelotti. Like they did have tactical instructions, but it was more about having the freedom to kind of take decisions on the pitch. Whereas he said that with Eric Ten Hag, um, he they got a lot more instructions, right? And he called his relationship with Ten Hag as tense. He said Ten Hag didn't like Ten Hag seemed to make an effort to listen to player feedback, but Ten Hag also seemed retaliatory when players actually gave feedback, which he says because he gave feedback to Ten Hag about his tactical decisions and all of that. And he says that after he said that, he didn't play for almost 2 months, and Varane felt even though he's fit, it was just because of the feedback he gave to Ten Hag about his tactics or his philosophy and other such things. He also said that Ten Hag kind of wanted to gain respect from the squad with fear, which to me seems very characteristic of Mr. Louis Van Gaal, who also wanted to use fear to gain respect. Um, I guess maybe to a certain extent Mourinho, but I think Mourinho was much more shrewd about these things. He knew how to tackle different. I think Mourinho was more like, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it felt like Mourinho was more like Sir Alex, where he had like a different style based on the player. Whereas Van Gaal was like, hey, I'm the boss. Be scared of me. I'll drop my pants. I'll do whatever to get you scared of me. Ten Hag, at least
He
from
did.
obviously,
He did drop his pants.
yeah, exactly. Uh, I think for I think for Varane, I mean, obviously we were only from one player, and other players haven't talked about it. I mean, many of them are still active, so we'll probably hear only about it maybe after a few years. But yeah, Varane definitely said that he wanted to gain respect through fear, is what Varane felt, and that he was always in conflict with certain leaders of the team, which feels I don't know, it feels a bit self-defeating. And yeah, he was also asked about United struggles with injuries, which United fans for a long time have complained about. We keep seeing so many injuries. Like, just look at now, we are like, our entire midfield is out injured, our wing backs are out injured, and Varane didn't really have too much of a satisfactory answer for that. He just talked about a demanding player schedule and all of that, but again, that is true with every team, not just United. So yeah, but I think the big thing was, him saying about Ten Hag's tactical decisions, where it almost again, I think that's another thing where to me reminded a lot about the Van Gaal era, where Louis Van Gaal gave a lot of tactical instructions. Maybe similar Jose too, but I think Jose gave some freedom. I think especially when the team was under Mourinho, I think Jose was a bit more forgiving. The team was scoring goals and being good, right? He would be forgiving, say if you're not tracking back or whatever. But we saw with Van Gaal, where Van Gaal was really like military razor focused, to a fault, about being in your correct position and passing passing to the right player. It doesn't matter if it's sideways. If Van Gaal thinks the ball should go sideways, the ball must go sideways, right? Doesn't matter if you're in front of the goal and the goal is open. If Van Gaal thinks the ball should go sideways, the ball better go sideways. And it felt to me from Varane's interview that Ten Hag was similar, right? A very rigid methodology and structure on how the game should be played. Um, and Varane did end the interview by saying that he was very surprised that Ten Hag was extended, for a third year. And then obviously he got fired in a couple of months after that. But yeah, I think that was my take for the interview. What do you guys think?
Oh, I just had one little tidbit there. It's interesting you said that thing about Louis Van Gaal because Wayne Rooney revealed in an interview like a few years ago that Louis van Gaal had an explicit instruction to United strikers that anytime you receive the ball in the box, take a touch before you take a shot. Even if you're in a good enough position to shoot, don't shoot first time. Always take a touch and then shoot. And Wayne said that that made him rethink a lot of shots, because that's a very instinctive action, almost getting interfered with, right? Due to it, it, it really raises for me, like Rohan, and I want to know what you feel about this, like this kind of growing
Yeah.
trend in football. For a few years, football's been moving in a very Pep or Louis Van Gaal sort of direction. They're different. I'm just giving examples where players are over engineered, over analyzed, and over directed. Like, this is what you must do in this zone of the pitch. Pep would tell Danny Alves, for instance, that the fullback never passes to the winger. Like, you don't play down the line, because in Pep's idea, it's like a wall pass which gets easily controlled by the other team. You kind of get boxed into the sideline. Uh, and this was a big theme with Pep. So I feel like football's been moving from, like, it had this big phase of this lot of directions and instructions to players, but it started moving in the reverse direction now. We saw that a little bit with Ancelotti's success in the UCL with Real Madrid. That team thrived off, like,
Yeah.
individuality at times, or almost like relational football between each other. We're seeing Bournemouth do this very well in the EPL, and their manager Iraola highlighted this. He spoke about how we want to create situations where players are taking more instinctive quick actions. So, Rohan, like, do you feel like there's this paradigm shift happening, or is it just sort of like some good teams in the moment?
Personally, I do believe that uh, having like the freedom and space to be instinctive on the pitch when the situation demands it, I think that is very important. Like, uh, over the years, we even, like, if we look at Sir Alex Ferguson's teams, I think uh, it was never like, you never felt like, okay, this was okay. They were like a well drilled, like, team, yes, but always they had that kind of freedom. Like, even if you look at, like, our trio of Tevez, Rooney, Ronaldo, which was probably like one of the most devastating attacks in football. Uh, even they even their finishes and their touches in the near and around the box were so instinctive and so quick, whi- which is why we succeeded a lot. Like, they
Yeah.
scored a lot
Mm.
of goals, and that was a very, like, it was amazing to see that. And I think even if as you mentioned, Real Madrid, right? Like, their UCL winning season, even looking at make Bellingham, he makes those runs in the box. You see Vinicius, he does his own thing when the situation demands it. Okay, I think it's perfectly fine to go in. Like, that would be my personal approach. Uh, Given uh, how coaches like Pep, and even, like, as you mentioned, Louis van Gaal, right, when they have their own set of ideas for what a player should do in each situation, and they're very rigid with it. I think it all depends on the, like, I wouldn't say that there is a paradigm shift. I would say that, given, like, if a coach decides beforehand that this is exactly how he wants to play, and he communicates that to the players, if the player is the right fit, I think even more instructions, he would be able to get it. Like, it wouldn't be that confusing. Like, if the player is not of the right mold, or he isn't profiled well, or maybe he is recovering from an injury, or there can be so many other factors. I think if some of those factors creep in, maybe then it may affect that performance. Like, you see, uh, you can clearly see the difference between Jack Grealish at Man City and how Jack Grealish was at Aston Villa, right? Yes, and Jack Grealish with
Yeah,
Man City, he ended up winning titles. He ended up winning trophies, and they have been doing it for a long time. And you could clearly see like Jack Grealish becoming that sort of like a machine kind of a thing where he comes in from the left foot, he creates space, he pushes to that side more to create space on the other side. So, like if that vision works, and if they have the players for it, yes, they can probably succeed with that. But personally, my take would be to be more like to be given like more freedom and being more instinctive. I don't think there is a paradigm shift. It's more like what the coach prefers and does he have the players to execute that vision. Like for let's say for example, if you like tell Vinicius, if Carlo Ancelotti ever tells Vinicius, okay, like Louis Van Gaal, right? Like you also don't, before like as Sombi pointed out, you also don't take you take a touch before you go for a shot, okay? Then maybe Vinicius would not be so close to winning a Ballon d'Or, right? Like we see the player that he's become into like potentially. And now, but let's say if we don't have a player like Vinicius, maybe someone who doesn't have that extra edge or that extra capability to beat that man and get past two people and maybe drill a perfect ball into the box, or maybe take that perfect finish shot. Maybe the instructions would work for a player like that, you know, like if you say like any because again, if you don't have that kind of quality, because not everybody is Vinicius Junior, right? If you don't have that quality, you still have to create attacking patterns for your team, which is where the instructions really help. And if you have someone who understands those instructions really well, I think they can pull it off. So it really depends on how the manager wants to approach it. Like there's no one way of coaching, right? Like there's no one singular way of doing things. If that works for them, then they are going to stick to it. Like whether it be Louis Van Gaal or whether it be Carlo Ancelotti. So I think it just like depends on the situation and what the coach wants the team to do.
right. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, makes
I, I
sense.
I think, yeah,
And also, I think also a lot of things is it's cycles, right, in world football. Uh, so see that,
hundred
and I
percent,
think
100%.
also,
I agree with you.
yeah, and I also kind of agree with Rowan as well. Like, and whenever you go too much into an extreme, things tend to fall apart, right? Um, Remember that famous joke about Arsenal trying to walk it in all the time, right?
Yeah,
So, yeah,
It,
I think it's also probably like if let's say everybody is playing the Pep style of football, right? So everybody's training for that. Everybody's training to attack that way, and everybody's training to defend from that style. So now you have kind of a phase where the collective sport is kind of forgetting about other styles of football. So then
yeah,
at some point other coaches will capitalize saying, hey, nobody really plays instinctive free flowing football anymore. Maybe if we play, we will kind of get this and start winning games, right? And we have seen that even in like say even in the Premier League, if you see, right, two about 2 or 3 seasons ago, Pep suddenly was like, hey, let's do something different. Let's have the fullbacks come into the midfield, and let's have the centre backs push out wide, and do this box formation. And you saw that initially had devastating results, and then now all the teams are copying that, man. Like freaking United is also doing that now.
right.
Uh,
Yeah,
Yeah.
actually, I would like to. Yeah,
So
yeah, I would like to point out, like Pratyush, I think hit the nail on the head there with that copy thing, right? Like we had one interview from Bastian Schweinsteiger also, some time ago. Like he was talking about like why, like during Pep's era, why Bayern Munich couldn't be the Bayern Munich of the like of before, right? Like they were one of the best attacks in the team, and like when Guardiola went in, it wasn't as good as before for them, and it was like they just and even that affected even the German football team as well. Even they started playing in a certain way which would like almost be
mhm,
similar to what Pep had instilled in them. So I think this thing of copying, I think that created more of a paradigm shift than the coach's individual choices of how the team should play. Because like each team has to be approached with a different, like if you go if you apply those like what Pep has applied on Barcelona, like his most successful team, like and then what he and then he comes into Bayern Munich and he applies it there, and then others also start doing that. Then there is no, then you are basically saying that okay, every team can play like that, and you just go in with that assumption, which is what causes that, I think, paradigm shift, which
right.
I think Somi was mentioning. Yeah, so which is which brought me to my point as well. Like as a coach, you have to go in and you have to see that how exactly would I like to play? Would I want to give my players more freedom, or do we have players like that who can take those instructions, and we need those patterns of play before we jump into giving in them more freedom? So maybe I think
Mm,
it's a matter of like decision making on the part of the manager as well.
yeah. No. Totally. Any final thoughts, Sandeep, before we move on?
Just this, that it's like, you kind of also hit the nail on the head when you said that football is really cyclical. It's interesting how there was a big period where everyone wanted to play possession based football, right? That and a lot of teams like United, who played a lot of transition based football under Sir Alex, for example, were forced to start adapting to that, or even criticized for focusing so much on transitions. But now in 2025, we're seeing Pep's team get decimated by transitions, right? Because what's happened is that teams have become so focused on finding a response to it that they've just gone the other way. They're like, okay, we can't beat you at your game, so we're going to change the nature of the game itself. It's going to become more chaotic, and that's how we're going to drag control away from you somehow. Or nobody's going to have control. Let's play in chaos. I also want to point out one other thing. Football's cyclical, but there's also a lot of reinventing the wheel that happens, which gets termed as genius, especially with Pep, because Guardiola popularized the concept of inverting fullbacks into midfield. Right, he started doing it a little bit
Yeah. Mm,
at Barcelona, but not that much. Mainly at Bayern, like you said, with Lam, right? And that was a revolution. Like, oh, like, inverting fullbacks. Now, that's not the first time that's been seen. Dennis Owen used to do the same thing for Manchester United under Sir Alex, but didn't quite receive as much publicity or focus. But that's okay. Definitely nobody probably used it as aggressively as like Pep. What's interesting is, uh, 3 or 4 years ago, or whenever City started to get better in the UCL and then win it, Pep transitioned to playing four
mhm,
defenders, uh, essentially you could say almost like four center backs with two full backs who were like Walker and I think Ake, right? Who like fullbacks who were like physical and robust themselves. So everyone started terming it as, oh, like here we suddenly have like four focused defenders playing at the back, and or four center backs playing at the back. But if
Right.
you zoom out, that's not a novel idea. Like teams in the 90s have did that for like years, right? Like I mean, how many games can you recall? If you remember, Wes Brown and John O'Shea have been center backs themselves, but they often played at fullback, right? It's not a novel concept to have four out and out defenders playing in your last line without any contribution to attack. So yeah, football's cyclical, but there's also so much reinventing the wheel that I think we just forget, probably due to how long this game has been around.
I
Yeah.
I I'd, I'd, I would also like
Yeah.
to
I
point
guess.
out like I would also
Hmm.
like to point out that when Pep Guardiola was at his peak, right? Like Barcelona was this unbeatable side and everything like that. But then Real Madrid they signed Jose, uh, signed Jose, and we saw like a lot of transition based football from his Real Madrid as well, like to counter that kind of a thing, like to counter Pep's possession based team. I think we saw like it wasn't like football had never seen this before. Like if we see right now, as Somi mentioned, there is transition based football more and everything, but these these tactics have already been used so much before as well, like by Jose Mourinho. Even I remember Jupp Heynckes Bayern did also use that against Barcelona, and it's just about like a manager comes in and he has to assess when he's playing a possession based team what options does he have, like whether to go into a transition based, whether to mix it up a little bit, how to beat the other team. I think that allows, and even in that he has to make sure that he gives the players instructions. It cannot be all instinctive, it cannot be all instruction based. I think that balance has to be there, and depending on the game, I think it can go, one thing can go over the other a little bit, but we usually end up seeing the best teams adapting to those kind of situations and then changing the level depending on what the opposition is they are facing and what the game is.
Hmm. Yep. On that note, we should. Yeah, that was a good discussion on tactics and how football keeps changing and how we reinvent and even a lot of Pep's thing was what Cruyff is total football, um, inspired by at least. Um,
100%, 100%.
but
Cruyff's
yeah, good
three four
points
three
by
diamond,
yeah.
like
I mean,
like
Pep also
Pep's.
what
That's where
had this
Amorim
weird
gets
4-4-2
inspiration
phase,
also.
right?
Man, Amorim's system is so different from that. Like, like Cruyff. It's interesting because he's remembered as a very attacking visionary, but he always pointed out that in some ways he's a very pragmatic manager. Like there's this beautiful video I watched of him where he explains that he wants, like, it feels like 3-4-3 is very attacking, but he sees it as very defense first because he's figuring out ways to occupy the midfield and defend from the front. And his whole principle is based on how do I defend at each phase of the pitch. Like Cruyff was a
Hmm.
genius, and I think a lot of Pep's early years are directly influenced by him.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Let's move on in the interest of time. Sorry, guys. But yeah, I think we should do a deeper tactical discussion at some point. Um, yeah, I did see for the past. We had a viewer come onto the stream when we started this tactical stuff, and they've still stayed. So I guess at least one person has found it interesting.
That's
Um,
wow.
yeah, right. So yeah, let's go to our final topic for today. Um, Finances. Yeah,
Back to
I know.
reality.
So United announced their financial results, I think last week, and our revenue beat estimates. We had revenue of 254 million, estimates are 248 million. But yeah, they think the more interesting stuff was that debt is increasing. Even the revenue beat estimate is still lower than uh, previous similar time periods, right? So we are seeing the impact of basically our mm, lack of success on the pitch finally catching up with us, right? Our revenues are going down. I think our revenue would continue to go down because, well, there's no Champions League either this time, right? I mean, we're playing in Europa this season, but I mean, for next season, the 25-26 season, we are probably not playing in Europe at all, right? Unless we miraculously win the Europa, which, guys, come on, are we beating Real Sociedad? I don't think so. But
I think there's more chance of us winning the Europa than there is of beating Real Sociedad, if that makes sense. like like we're a team capable of like insane, inexplicable stuff, but beating a decent mid-table Spanish side because they are mid-table right now. Uh, that's tough, and I guess we're lower table, so yeah.
yeah. So yeah, I think we are seeing the effects of our lack of success catch up with us. Um, yeah, I think it's just a bit sad that all these years of bad decisions, like people have been saying that it will catch up at some point, catch up at some point, catch up at some point, and then especially the like I think some of the terrible transfers in the last few seasons, right? Whether you take Jadon Sancho, right, starting with him. Um, I wanted to say Alexis, but Alexis at least didn't have a financial hit on the club because it was a swap deal. So yeah, I would rather start there. But Jadon Sancho, um, I don't think Varane cost as much. Right? Sancho literally cost about 80 million, right? Varane probably cost us
Closer to 100.
much less.
Closer to 100.
Closer to 100.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Sancho, yeah, 80 to 100. Yeah. But and then to not just Sancho, but after that, like a couple of seasons ago, Anthony and Hoyland, both for like 80 million each. We bought
Casemiro.
even before that, what Donny Van de Beek for what 50 million. Just like a series of bad decisions, and we're also never been a club that can sell, right? Um, I think INEOS, to their credit, is trying now to kind of sell. But I mean, historically, the last, let's say, 5-6 seasons, we have been really, really pathetic at selling. We've been writing off assets for a while now because we can't, find buyers for our players. Um, and I think there's the fact that all of this is, kind of coming to a head now. Like, I mean, yes, we also did, make losses, but I mean, yeah, I mean, people will say, hey, we always make losses because you want to avoid taxes or all that. But I think these losses are now piling up, right? Even last season, we were very, very close to breaching the PSR limits for how much loss you can make, right? I think at some point, it's not how much you can avoid in taxes, but like the amount of losses you're making. Forget about tax, man. We are broke. Like we also saw the report said that we our cash reserves are also very, very down. Our interest payments are increasing. um, I know I don't want to say that INEOS did not pay down the debt much, right? They're just making minimum payments like before. But also, if you think about it, INEOS is a minority stakeholder, right? 25% or whatever. So any payments they make on the debt would just benefit the Glazers, right? It's even more, in a way, free money to the Glazers, because if INEOS pays down the debt, that basically increases, the value of the club for any, future buyers. Like the value of the club might be same. Like the club might be worth say 5 billion today in a sale, and it might be 5 billion tomorrow as well. 6 months later, when Glazers are like, hey, let's sell the club. But if today it is 5 billion plus some X amount of debt that we have, and if INEOS pays down the debt now for a future buyer, it is 5 billion without or plus a lower amount of debt, which makes the deal much easier for the Glazers. So I don't blame INEOS, to be honest, for not paying down the debt, with them being minority owners. But it just goes to show how much the Glazers have just leached out of the club, right? And we also saw, this, um, in December, the Athletic ran a very, very deep investigation on how United is doing cost cutting, right? And before I criticize Ineos for some of the more mind-numbingly stupid stuff that they've done in that, but if you look at why they even had to do these things, right? Our club is making losses upon losses, every season, much beyond what clubs would do to avoid taxes. And the club is running low on cash. The club has a bloated structure, right? And at some, and the fact that all the fans are blaming Ineos for this, I mean, which sure, we'll get into the, we'll get to the things where they actually deserve the blame. But the fact that, they even had to do this, like, I think Radcliffe has publicly said that, hey, we really need to do these cuts because the club really doesn't have money in hand, right? We don't make that much money. Our results on the pitch are garbage, right? It just, I think, I know Somdeep and I have talked a lot about this previously. It just feels like Ineos has got yet another, not sorry, not Ineos. It feels like the Glazers have got yet another scapegoat to throw the problems on, right? Like you see how the fans are talking, right? Like, I mean, sure, I get it. Ineos has done some dumb stuff, right? Like cancel Christmas parties or making the staff, pay for themselves to go to the FA Cup game, and people are like, the Glazers would never have done this. But that is the point. The like, see, I'm not defending Ineos. Like, we'll get to it. Ineos have done a lot of nonsense, in name of cost cutting. But the very fact that the fans are again blaming somebody else and not the Glazers, it just shows that the Glazers are just enjoying life, man. Like they're like, hey, we have gotten them off their backs. We have gotten these fans who have been annoying us for the past 20 years, saying Glazers out, Glazers out. Now all the chant is Ineos out. Like at games now, United match going fans are chanting Ineos out. People have forgotten about Glazers out, man. People are just chanting Ineos out now. Like all the heat has been just transferred to Ineos overnight. And Ineos is not even majority owners. Is this a masterstroke by the Glazers? I know I'm being sensationalist, but you get my point.
Um, it's a see the Glazers. Whatever we might feel about them as fans, right? And I think everyone's like poured a lot of vitriol towards them, and rightly so. They've always been astute businessmen. They managed to find the one asset, one of the few assets in the world, which somehow succeeds despite any like links to its performance. Like yes, you say that the markets react to sentiment, but they react to sentiment of perceived performance, right? There's some basis for it. uh, but Manchester United's been kind of in a free fall for like a decade now, under Glazer ownership, but this asset's still been minting them money. They've still been making
Yeah.
dividends. They've still been uh, feeding off the udder of Manchester United, undeservingly so. So yeah, they're astute
Yeah.
businessmen, and I think I don't think they. ever wanted to sell, but the financial issue of not succeeding finally started to catch up with them. They created the revolving credit facility around 3 years ago, where they borrow money from, I think, HSBC or some other bank, and that helps us buy players. That was their short-term fix at ludicrous interest rates.
Hmm.
Right. The problem is that this created a debt cycle of its own, which I think right now our transfer debt is at like 400 or 350 million if you include incomings and outgoings.
Yeah.
And that's a pretty big debt in itself. And I believe 350 million is what we have to pay by the end of next year, if I'm not wrong. Of course, I don't know how the financial tinkering works there, but that's the numbers. So yeah, they're smart because they're like, okay, we're in this tight mess. Uh, Ideally, we want to sell the club, but nobody's giving us the value we think our cash cow deserves. So let's find somebody who buys a
Hmm.
minority stake, runs the
Yeah.
club for us, which anyway we don't enjoy because people are giving us death threats, and the that minority stake acts like an immediate cash injection into the club, which it massively needed to stay afloat. So yeah, they found a great scapegoat, 100%, and I'm with you on that. Uh, so a lot of the issues we're seeing at the club, of course, like INEOS is not the primary cause for it, uh, and then the Glazers once again are getting away with it. And then they will continue to do so because whatever we might think of them, they are clever businessmen. And now coming to INEOS, right? Because they're the ones running things right now. Uh, Definitely, I mean, they entered in a tricky situation. There's this immediate need to bring success to the club, which is not easy in the Premier League, right? Especially right now with all the money involved, and far more. I think
Hmm.
owners and other teams are way more willing to spend, and they have the money for it, or the money to be comfortable with it. uh, so Ineos have entered in a difficult situation, but I actually think the moves they've made, like the number of staff they've cut, or even canceling the Christmas party, it really takes away from the issues they've created. Because in this period, in the short period they've been at the club, they've wasted 25 million in retaining, firing, and replacing Eric Ten Hag, in that order. You know, because we're still paying Eric Ten Hag. He's still making,
Yeah.
I think,
Yeah.
21 million or something in arrears from Manchester United. We paid the buyout for Ruben Amram. That's what, 10 million. That was his clause. Uh, we we so yeah, I mean,
Also, Dan
and we.
Ashworth.
Oh yes, and there's
Damn.
Ashworth. Thank you. Yeah, I forgot Dan Ashworth, but that's another 10 million there. 5 million to hire him, and then 5 million to fire him. So, like off the top of my head, that's like 40 million of pretty wasteful expenditure. Like they could have done nothing, and it would have been,
Yeah.
we could have still been 15th. So, uh, they, them being in a tricky situation makes sense. And to me, it would explain, let's say, why they can't splurge on expensive players right now, because we're already tight with FFP. It doesn't make sense, or give them room to make repeated mistakes of this level. Like they've been, like, they've made errors, but they've been very hot-handed about how they've gone about it, right? Like 10 million to hire and fire a sporting director just like that. I mean, that seems a little extreme to me, don't you think? Someone who's got a pretty decent record of success in the Premier League to some extent, with teams who are arguably in better positions than us now.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's why I want to, kind of come to Ineos as well. Like, Somdeep talked about, you know, retaining, extending, and firing Ten Hag, Dan Ashworth. Yeah, all these decisions seem to be, yeah, really, really dumb. Um, but I think not just that. I think if you look at the way the like the obviously the athletic investigation, they talked about how INEOS, like none of the people at the club are denying that they need to cut costs, right? They recognize that the club has become bloated and has become this uh, you know oversized beast, as if you may. But they talk about the way the club has been making cuts, right? So when Ineos took over in Christmas 2023, the club was reported to have around what 1150 or so staff. Now we're down to 650, so we laid off 500. But what they were saying is, I mean, sure, you lay off 500 if your average salary is, I don't know, man, 100K, and it's a UK, so the cost to company is probably more like 250K per person. And then that means, sure, you saved 125 million. But what about the other things, right? Like you canceled a Christmas party, or, you know, we went to the FA Cup final, and then you're making the support staff pay out of their own pocket to attend the game, while the club executives come to the game in their fancy chauffeur driven cars and private jets and charge the club for it, right? Um, or also, the club being penny pinching about things like, say, staplers and such kind of stationary items. Like how much are you really saving? Like, I get it, the club is losing money, right? I get it that the club needs to cut costs, but are you really saving much by this, cutting staplers and then on all these kind of things? And then you have Bruno Fernandes offering to pay these expenses out of pocket, right? And then the club says, hey, actually no, it will make us look bad. Like, dude, what do you want, right? um I mean, I'm not saying everything they did was bad, like they but again, I think it's like the scale, right? Like, sure, you say, employees should not just use the company credit card or, your corporate credit card to buy whatever, right? Um, Reportedly, when during United's preseason tour, um, apparently one night, some people went to a nightclub, charged $3,000 to the company card, right? Sure, I get things like that. You want to cut down, right? Player wastage or whatever. But then at the other time, you also say, hey, count the number of screws we are buying, right? Fine. I mean, these might seem frivolous, but there was a thing where uh, they were talking about that. Um, Man, this is really embarrassing for a club of United size. But they were talking about that United had to, meet some sponsor partners, right? And the club was nickeling and diming about the meal or something like that, right? And apparently the sponsor was shocked that why is United behaving this way? This is a club that's making half $250 million every quarter, right? And you have the club, nickeling and diming your sponsor whom you're asking money for, and you're being miserly towards them when meeting them, right? There are also like other things where United does some charity works and all that, which is like, say 10-20 grand per organization, and like the disabled supporters or former United players, and they're having payments, right? Like all of this combines like what, 100K a year. Are you really saving much by saving 100K a year? And Anthony makes more than that in a week, right? Or if you take things like um yeah, I mean, so these are, I think, things where a lot of the people who been with the club. Like for example, they also canceled the steward of the week bonus, right? Your match day stewards who keep your crowd orderly and ensure everything is smoothly running and all that. And they used to apparently be a steward of the week bonus as a kind of a encouragement to the staff to do a good job. They removed that. They fired a lot of full-time stewards. Not fired, more like they're not extending contracts of full-time stewards because INEOS thinks they can just get temporary people for cheaper, right? But how much are you really saving with like a steward who's already like say like an hourly employee or a contract employee, right? Not a full-time staff. So I think these are the things that a lot of the staff at the club feel it's becoming well they're losing kind of like the soul of the club, right? There's also this thing, and I can't find it now, but
Uh,
remember when our uh, receptionist, our long time receptionist, passed away, Cat Phipps.
yeah, yeah.
um
I just wanted to
Apparently,
highlight the
even
same thing.
to organize a service for her, the club really didn't do it. Players and ex-players and ex-staff members
Are you
organize
serious?
that service for her.
Wow.
Yeah. So
I did
yeah,
not know
that's what I
that.
mean when I say that the amount of cost cutting sometimes feels like it's going a bit overboard, right?
Yeah,
Like I get it that your club had too many staff. Sure, you save 100 million, firing half the staff, like laying them off. Sure, I get it. The club was bloated, but really, how much are you going to save by not having a memorial service for your receptionist who's been in the club for 60 years, or like having a Christmas party, or sponsoring your staff members coach like a 20 pound coach ticket to Wembley from Manchester, right? Things like that is what is rubbing people the wrong way. Yeah, Sandeep.
Yeah, no, it's interesting you spoke about cats because Lady Cats because uh, and she's an icon, right? She's a figure like interwoven with United's history
Yeah.
since decades,
Hmm.
right? Um, so
Yeah.
recently there was an article in the Telegraph where it emerged that uh, after her demise, the club officials contacted her next of kin, and they inquired about the status of her two season tickets, which were assigned to her.
Yep. Yep.
Um, uh,
Yeah, and because
what's
that story went viral, the club immediately retracted the inquiry.
Yeah, but the interesting thing is United's response to that, right? Which was obviously a press briefing. That Manchester United, however, clarified that this was a misunderstanding, emphasizing
Yeah, yeah,
that there was no request to recall the tickets. Now, that sounds like a good save, right? But here's the thing: if they're emphasizing that there was no request to recall the tickets, does that mean they did inquire? Because they're not denying they inquired. They're just saying
Yeah.
that we didn't ask to have it back.
Right.
So the club thought that this is the time to inquire anything about those tickets. Like, the, and that's their own words, right? They're saying that hey, we didn't want it back, but so we did have that conversation, right? Uh,
Yeah.
that's kind of troubling, and it's like what you said. I mean, yeah, like somewhere the fabric of the club is changing a little bit. I think a lot, and in ways that maybe we're not fully understanding as fans right now, but in a few
yeah,
years we'll you know bring out more stories like this.
yeah, and it's kind of so it's in a contrast with say our noisy neighbors, right? Um, like everybody and their mother is aghast, that a nation state owns Man City, right? And they rightly get a lot of criticism for like a little country running owning a club, and all the conflicts of interest, and also them being a theocratic autocratic state ruling. But if you look at the club or day-to-day operations, To their credit, the city ownership group has done a lot of community building activities and all that in Greater Manchester, um, in more like downtown Manchester, where Man City is based, right? Because United is more like a suburb in Trafford. Man City is more, Etihad Stadium is in downtown Manchester, right? And they've done a lot of community activities, and a lot of people, their staff talks about how, I mean, City, to be fair, has also had layoffs and staff reductions and those kind of things. But they also talk about how they've kept the fabric of the club, and they've kept that kind of quote unquote the soul of the club. But if you look at United's INEOS here, like the same thing, staff don't disagree that we needed cuts, right? But their problem is with the manner in which these cuts were made and the manner in which you know um, there's lack of empathy is what they say in how these cuts were made. Like it felt very very robotic and corporate to staff. So
Yeah, and I mean, City of, like, along with all of that, they've also built a top class football project, right?
yeah,
Like the primary objective of any football club is to be good at football,
right,
is to win trophies and play well in that process.
right,
So I feel like, and nothing else really. If you zoom out, like, of course being helpful in the community is important, and they
hmm,
should do that. That's part of being good in football to me. So I feel like whatever people might feel about City's ownership of the club, or Ineos's ownership of United, whatever,
yeah,
the truth is that Man City's owners run a great football club,
yeah,
and they run it to 100%,
right,
right? And they do it successfully. They do it in a way that their fans, I think, comparatively like more than we do. And they do the community outreach part, so they're kind of ticking all the boxes. Ineos is like 0 for 3, you know. So really, who's doing the better job here, like, of being a football club, if you think about it? Like,
yeah,
I mean, if we're talking about goals in football or just the objectives of it, like, they're the ones ticking every box, not Manchester United. I mean,
yeah,
we-
agreed.
we're not even like respecting the legacy of our own legends or greats right now.
Yeah. And it seems like, these issues will continue. I mean, especially now with um the stadium, right? That's that's again going to cause a lot of, you know, we don't know yet how the deal is going to be structured, right? But it's widely speculated it's going to be a $2 billion investment. Obviously, TBD on how much the government chips in for that, and how much whatever debt and external sponsors. There also talks about the stadium being having a naming sponsor to kind of offset some of the costs. But it feels like these cuts will continue. And I mean, what's the guy's name? Omar Barada. He said as much, right, in the recent meeting uh, with that he had with the staff, saying that more cuts can continue, and then more cuts can happen. And then the next day, we saw reports that our scouting team might be next, to get cut. Um, Again, I'm not disagreeing with the premise that sure our scouting team might be bloated, right? But again, people again, like I said, have issue with how we are doing these cuts, right? It's why people are even leaking this, right? I mean, let's say United, did cuts, but they were empathetic, gave um, okay, I don't know how much severance they gave, so I'll not comment on that. But let's say they did this in a nice way, right? Like where people were felt taken care of, and didn't feel nickel and dimed, even if you're part of the club. Right now, what people are saying, there's like this culture of fear at the club, and people are scared what will happen next, right? So I think that's the thing where if you're kind of putting people in such fear, uh, for a job, and it's a football club, right? It's not a chemical factory that Ineos is running, right? Lot of people work at United because they genuinely love the club, because they support the club from generations together. So I think that is something Ineos should understand. For how running a football club is different from, say, running a chemical production factory, or such kind of companies, which I don't think they're getting. Like, their intentions may be in the right place, right? That they want to cut costs and kind of trim the fat, and have the club in a more healthy financial situation. But the heartless way they've been going is, it's why it's causing all the leaks, right? Why staff are disgruntled. Even the staff who are at the club are leaking this stuff to the media, the press, or whoever. And it's leaking so bad that, hey, should play the video, right, Sandeep?
Yeah, yeah. What better way to capture the predicament?
Yeah,
Yeah.
the club is leaking so bad, even the stadium is
Charlotte.
crying.
What is it, a drip? Yeah. Hey? The drips. Do you want to just move? Yeah.
We're speaking about the short-term project and
Yeah, there you go.
Oh, they continue the interview.
Yeah, they continue. No, so it was. So I saw the tweet where they're saying that reporters who sitting in the front row had to move because the water was falling on their heads from the roof. Well, yeah, that's how bad the leaks are in our club, I guess.
Maybe Ineos, they're trying to recreate some of their sailing success at Old Trafford. Oh wait, they haven't had any. Yeah, it's maybe tangential to United, but there's been a theme of Ineos pulling out of investments lately. So they
Yeah, yeah,
stopped
yeah.
sponsoring Tottenham recently, like last week. I didn't know this, but they were apparently were sponsors
Yeah,
for
they're trying to get
Tottenham
out
in
of
some
Tottenham,
capacity.
which, I mean, good
Yeah,
man. They shouldn't be having two clubs.
I agree, but they also reneged on their agreement with New Zealand Sailing. I think.
Oh,
I think it was like a 30 million deal or something, and they've been sponsors for the last 3 years. But
yeah.
they're out of it
Hmm.
now as of 2025.
I see. Oh, they're
They've
out.
stopped
Okay.
investing. Yeah, and they stopped investing in Team Sky. Used to
Hmm.
be called Team Sky, but now Ineos Cycling.
Yeah.
Uh, I don't know. It kind of feels like there's a
Oh,
pulling back.
yeah. It's not just all of this, Somdeep. There's one more you forget. There have been reports that Ineos is trying to get out of the Mercedes partnership as well in F1.
Oh, they are. Wait, that's one of probably their most successful avenue, right?
No, actually, the
That's
team
concerning.
became crap after Ineos joined the
Yeah, I feel like it's a theme with Ineos. Like this isn't
I
being
mean,
noticed
okay,
at United.
yeah, I think to be fair, at least for Mercedes, that was not in India's control, and they're not a majority stakeholder either.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, no, but I think it's more that it coincided with the new regulations, and yeah, I think Mercedes didn't let Ineos take over sporting control. That was just their own incompetence. Uh,
Yeah, interestingly, like in 2025, I never thought this would be the case, but the most successful Ineos project right now seems to be OGC Nice, because they're third, man. They're
wow.
third in League One, if I'm not wrong. Like let's cross check that. But last I checked, they are
Let's
on a roll.
see. Let's see. League table. Yep, Nice is third, and they
Yeah,
have
and they have
won.
3 wins out of the last 5.
Yeah, and one is a draw and one is a loss. Well, not bad.
Yeah, they just overtook Monaco. So this is
Yeah, they're ahead
somehow their
of they're ahead
most
of Monaco
successful
on
venture.
goal difference. Wow, seems like a far cry
Yeah,
for us.
yeah. So wow, congratulations, Nice.
Well, I guess
This was
Nice.
not on any of our bingo
So
cards.
what? It took Nice what 7-8 years to get good.
I mean, like they made it.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's all
finally.
that counts. Yeah, they were fifth last year, to be honest.
Okay.
So they've not been in the
Mm-hmm.
doldrums, but still.
Right.
This is impressive, right? From
Yeah.
I know somewhere
So
out there,
mhm.
Sir David Brailsford's like drawing up a presentation on PowerPoint, talking about how they've introduced a culture of winning at Nice. You know, and they're gonna fax it to all their teams, including Mercedes.
Huh. Really? Really? Culture of winning at Nice. Had I forgotten how Nice played for so many years after INEOS took over? Man, it'll be really epic if.
Mission 21 is underway.
No, no, it'll be
Mission
really.
21 is underway.
Yeah, yeah. No, yeah, that's what I'm saying. If you're really epic, let's say in 3 years, let's say United finally, stumble their way to being a top six team again. And then let's say INEOS sends out a fax to all their teams. Culture of winning at Manchester United. Like, bro, do you know what this club was before?
I mean, they did that with the Team Sky stuff, but Team Sky was successful long before INEOS
Exactly. Yeah.
joined them, right?
Yeah.
Right. So, and they pulled that stuff at United as well. Like they showed that PPT on day one. And, I don't know, like they're funny,
Yeah.
They really are.
Well, I guess on that note, we will end today's episode. So yeah, thanks everyone who joined us live. And if you're seeing this on YouTube, do leave a comment below on what you liked about the stream or what you would want to see in the future. And don't forget to the general like, share, subscribe. You know the drill. But I guess that's it from us today, and we will see you next week. We play Everton tomorrow.
Yeah, try not to wake up too early.
Yeah. Oh, we play Everton. Yeah. Tomorrow for you, it's tonight for me. Yeah. And we also have Ipswich midweek, which is going to be really interesting. Okay, a quick straw poll before we end. Not even straw poll, more like a quick yes or no question before we leave. Are we beating Ipswich? I say no. What about you guys?
I'll say yes.
Okay. Sandeep?
Just for
Straw poll is right, man, because we're clutching at straws. But I think we lose to Everton, and I think we draw with Ipswich.
No, draw with Ipswich. Okay, so we have win, lose, and draw, all three. So the
Okay.
pod is hedging their bets. That
Or we see a loss with Ipswich. Like that would be my other guess.
yeah. But yeah, let's say, especially with that injury scenario, I think a win is hard. And with the form Delap is in. But yeah, we'll catch you guys. We'll catch you folks next weekend. We'll discuss the Everton Ipswich games and any other news stories. It's United, so always going to be drama. So there's no lack of drama in our club. So we'll catch you next weekend. And yeah, see you folks.